All right, welcome back, guys. We got some more to cover regarding the muscular system. So let's continue moving forward. All right, so let's see where we left off. Okay, where we left off, we were talking about, in the last video, the sliding filament theory. And we discussed a lot of stuff regarding thick and thin filaments and how the muscle fibers or the muscle filaments are going to slide over each other and inevitably create a contraction, which generates force. But we mentioned that the one thing that is the limiting factor for all this is how much energy they have. So, dependent on how much energy they have, allows for this to continue happening. So, this video will discuss more about how we utilize energy and how we make energy, to be more precise. So, initially, muscles use stored ATP for energy. So, initially, what's going to happen is you're going to use the stored ATP, any energy that's found in the muscles already. Um, ATP, again, is the currency of your body as far as your energy currency. Think of like the dollar being the currency of the American system. Your ATP is the currency of us, and it's going to be necessary for energy purposes. Adenosine triphosphate, as we call it. The problem is this: it only lasts for roughly 4 to 6 seconds worth of ATP in the muscles. Not a lot, right? After this initial time, other pathways must be utilized to produce ATP. So that's what we get to discuss today. So, one of the first pathways that we can utilize is a concept called direct phosphorylation. Direct phosphorylation is when your muscles use a particular molecule called creatine phosphate. Sorry. So, they use a particular muscle called creatine phosphate. Creatine phosphate is a high energy molecule. It's going to recharge ADP, which is what's left over after your ATP is depleted. And thus, you can use ATP again. The concern is that your muscles only have enough creatine phosphate to provide you with another roughly 20 seconds. So it's not exactly a ton of extra energy. So there's got to be better methods, right? Well, there are. We have another method called anaerobic glycolysis. Anaerobic glycolysis is a reaction that breaks down glucose without oxygen. That's the key word here. You don't need oxygen for this to happen. Glucose is broken down to pyruvic acid to produce ATP. Think of pyruvic acid like a cousin of your glucose. So they're related, right? Inevitably, the pyruvic acid will then break further down into lactic acid, which that's when things can get a little bit problematic. So let's talk about that. So, first of all, while yes, this reaction is fast, right? It's very quick. The problem is it's not very efficient. And the reason for its inefficiency problems is that you use too much glucose. Even though per molecule of glucose we get 2 ATP, that's still not a great deal. We're not getting the most out of this. Not to mention, arguably, the biggest problem with the anaerobic pathway is this lactic acid buildup. As lactic acid builds up, it actually produces muscle fatigue, and that's what we're going to talk closer about in the end of the video. As far as this muscle fatigue tires you. Okay, so the best method, without a doubt, the best method of making energy in your body, or ATP as we call it, is going to be the aerobic pathway or aerobic respiration. So what we observe is that it's a series of metabolic pathways that occur in the mitochondria. Remember, the powerhouse of the cell, as we like to call it. The powerhouse, it's called the powerhouse because it makes a ton of ATP. Glucose is broken down to carbon dioxide and water, releasing energy. Of course, we breathe the carbon dioxide out because it's a waste product. This is a slower reaction that requires continuous oxygen. Key words here. This entire reaction needs oxygen. That is the key. Back in respiratory system, we mentioned how there's literally one reason why we breathe oxygen, and this is it. We need oxygen in order for your body to make a ton of ATP to last you hours. Now, how much ATP do we make? 36 ATP. That would be relevant for you to pay attention to. 36 ATP per molecule of glucose. Very good payout. So you make a lot of energy per molecule. But again, the concern is that you have two limiting factors. You're going to have a limiting factor in how much oxygen there is. You're also going to have a limiting factor with how much energy there is. So how much of your energy source. So for instance, we do love glucose. We're going to use carbs whenever possible, right? But if you run out of glucose, you're going to divert yourself into fats or fatty acids. And then from there, if it's an extreme situation like you're starving, you're then going to use your amino acids from your proteins. This is all stuff we learned in macromolecules, right? Finally, When a muscle is fatigued and is unable to contract, the common reason for muscle fatigue is oxygen debt. So just like normal debt, right? Oxygen debt must be repaid from the tissue to remove said debt. So the oxygen must be repaid to the tissue to remove the debt. Um, the biggest reason why we need a lot of oxygen when we are in debt is to get rid of lactic acid. It literally sticks to your muscles and makes it even more difficult for your muscles to function. Think of it like a glue. Now, lactic acid affects your body in a two-pronged attack. It makes it so that you have less ATP overall, but it also increases the acidity of the blood. So overall, this just makes you more and more tired. So it is a very effective way to slow you down, which once again is why the anaerobic pathway can be difficult. It's like a double-edged sword. It can benefit you, right? It can improve, it can give you energy instantly, but it's going to tire you. Now, the last thing I want to do is just very quickly do a little list of sorts, identifying the priorities of energy. So we're just going to label this energy prioritization. Okay. So number one, you're exercising. You need energy, right? What are you going to use as your energy source? Stored ATP. You're going to utilize that stored ATP as soon as possible, but if we recall, that stored ATP only lasts you 5 seconds. It's not a lot. Then we need to divert ourselves to another form of energy. So you're going to use creatine phosphate. Now, this is also referred to as direct phosphorylation, but creatine phosphate was actually doing this. That's going to add us another 20 seconds to our time. All right, cool. Then we divert to the big guns. You're going to use aerobic respiration. As we know, aerobic respiration can last for hours. But I'm going to put an asterisk mark next to that. Why? The reason for that is because even though it can last for hours, it depends on two major factors. It depends on how much of your energy source you have. So for instance, if you don't have enough glucose, you're going to be lightheaded while you're going to feel like you're dizzy and pass out possibly while you're exercising. And the other thing that can affect aerobic respiration as far as the rate of aerobic respiration is, of course, oxygen. If you're running low on oxygen, which is typically the case, but you still need more energy after that, your body basically says, all right, there's no turning back. I guess we're going to dip into our last possible method of making energy. And that's anaerobic glycolysis, or anaerobic respiration is sometimes what it's called. But anaerobic glycolysis, your body starts to make ATP as fast as possible by burning glucose directly, but you are then going to be making, as a byproduct, lactic acid. Lactic acid will build up. It's going to make you more tired. So it's just like basically this boulder rolling down a mountain effect where it just becomes worse and worse and worse until inevitably you stop. You stop doing your exercise, you stop doing your thing, and you rest in order to break down that accumulating lactic acid. Okay, so I think that's a great place for us to conclude. Pretty short video overall. It was just kind of going over some of the major discussions relating to energy and how we make energy in the body and how we use energy, especially for our muscles. All right, so thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you guys on the next one.